In the Footsteps of War, a short story written and read by Nebel. It fell to earth like black flakes of snow, except it wasn't snow. Each individual flake flurried and spun until it fell to its final resting place, but could it really rest? Silence was broken in the woods only by the marching boots snapping through the undergrowth, the only natural thing left in this unnatural environment. As the boots continued to march, the silence and stench violated the senses of everyone marching. They were getting close to the camp. That's how they knew the stench was not coming from them anymore. A new smell of war had entered their sensory vocabulary, an unmistakable one that would be burned into their minds until they passed on. And who knew how long that would be, each and every one of them going on but by the grace of God. The black snow-like flakes continued to fall, covering the ground like a well-laid carpet, fitted between every inch of tree and frozen root. The crunch of snow was stifled and softened by it. Dawn was still being cushioned by night. A new day normally brings new hope, but not here and not in their war. Any light that would have been made by the pure white snow was eclipsed by the impure blanket of blackness on the woodland floor. As they got closer and closer, not speaking, not daring to breathe heavier than was needed, the command to stop was given by the raise of an arm. The next movement was drop to the ground and take aim at the iron gates to the camp. As their heavy bodies hit the ground, the carpet of blackness was strewn upwards and off of the woodland floor, clinging to their hair, their ears, and their lips. With every inhalation drew in a piece of scattered soul. An order was given and a lone soldier approached the gates on his belly. The noise of machine guns being cocked and ready could be heard clinking and clunking to provide covering fire. As the lone soldier got closer, the dirt of war was washed away by sweat from his teenage face. The men had not shaved for days. By his face you could not tell. He was only 10 feet away. The snail trail he had made on his belly through the snow was grey. He was 7 feet away. The rest of the men took a firm and sure aim at the gates and surrounding fences. He was 3 feet away. Lying perfectly still, covered in continually falling black flakes, he moved in on his destination. His cold hand reached the foot of the gate. He was in the centre of the two gates where they would part once opened. The smell was stronger, and he held down most of his vomit with grit. The rest ran out of the corners of his mouth. His eyes scoured for a lock or chain or some kind of anything preventing the gates being opened. He found nothing. Could it be a trap? He held out one hand, and his bare flesh pressed on ice-cold steel. His skin burned as one of the gates creaked, but did not open. Snow fell from the gate as it shook and fell down the back of his neck. His head was down and unsure. There was a silence and a mood, anticipating fire from the camp guards. There was none. The lone soldier turned to his captain, looking for advice. The captain signalled to push the gates harder next time. He raised his head and looked once more at the gates. He looked through them and beyond into the camp. He could make out what looked like people moving in indiscriminate patterns, and a huge chimney bellowing thick black smoke high into the winter sky. Dare he stand to push the gates this time? Once more, still laid on the ground, he turned and looked back at his captain and to the hidden surrounding men. Amongst the woods they were practically invisible. He was saying goodbye. He locked his gun and brushed off the frost from the barrel of his rifle. He squeezed the gun hard with fear as he gripped it. He slowly got to his knees, then raising one leg at a time until he stood. He held the handle of the gun with his right hand and raised it diagonally across his chest. He pushed his body into the left gate and forced it open. He looked up towards where he had seen what looked like people moving. They had stopped and they were still. He dropped his rifle and brought it up to his eye level, and he took aim. The scope on his gun was blurred and frosted with ice. He squeezed the trigger, and the shot flew high into the air over the heads of the still herd of people. They didn't move. He nervously moved his head to the side, his chin pressed against the rifle. His left eye was blinkered by the barrel of the rifle, and it guided his sight onto his target. He blinked rapidly, trying to gain some kind of focus. His cattle hadn't returned fire. He felt a hand on his shoulder squeeze his skinny frame. The rest of the men fell in from behind and gathered at the gates. They all stood there, in silence. The captain rubbed the lenses on his binoculars and took another look. The captain told his men to lower their weapons. Together with the lone soldier, the captain pushed hard against the heavy gates. The men huddled between the gates and started to funnel into the camp, very slowly. Their eyes did not move from the skeletal ghosts of the walking dead, woefully coming their way. The stench was hard to take as it was, but as they got closer, the stronger it became. The soldiers, led by the captain, walked towards them. The captain realised if he had walked into hell, it was a hell where war was still being fought. Snapping out of whatever place his mind had been taken to, he gave the order for the men to spread out and secure the camp. The prisoners were now standing vis-à-vis with the faces of liberation. Some of the soldiers vomited and tried to be as discreet as possible. Others just sighed and lowered their heads, removing their helmets. Some were close to tears. 1,000 emotions and more ran through the veins of these war-hardened men, humbled and disgraced at whom they saw stood in front of them. They thought they had already seen death's final hand in a game none of them wanted to play, but they had been wrong. As the skeletal remains of the still conscious innocents stood and stared, with their motionless faces, their mouths open, black and whole from missing teeth, their bones and skin were no longer separate organic things, they were as one, deathly macabre and impossible to see where the flesh started and the bones began. The smell of disease and diarrhoea was not only in the air, but was also apparent to see. It was the symbol of evil extermination at its peak. Everything about the camp had a rotting feel to it, a deep-rooted, rotting evil feeling. Finally realising and compounded by truth, they scrambled to spit out the black snowflakes, or ash, as they now understood it to be, and pulled their clothing over their mouths. The smoke was still bellowing out from the chimney. The captain stared into the eyes of the prisoner closest to him. He pushed his teeth together, moving his jaw, trying to control his own emotions. He put out his own hand to shake that of the prisoner's. The ghost of a man just stood there. The captain moved towards him and took hold of the prisoner's hand and placed it in his own, and shook it. The prisoner collapsed into the captain's body. It was over. The roar of vehicles came thundering up behind them, and more soldiers alighted onto the blackened snow. These were the soldiers that should have arrived 9 days ago. These were the soldiers that should have been sitting in their own waste for the last week. But the unfairness of war made everything and everyone equal eventually, except the innocent. A whistle was blown from inside of one of the many huts within the compound. A group of soldiers ran towards the noise and drew their weapons. Once inside, they could see 20 or 30 German soldiers sitting smoking cigarettes, their uniforms undone and their sleeves rolled up. Desolate and not caring, they had carried out their last instructions to their final solution and knew the arms of Churchill and Eisenhower would soon be around them. There were already 5 Allied soldiers in the hut with the German soldiers by the time the captain arrived with more men. The immediate thought was to butcher the German bastards with rapid fire right there and then. He gave the order to search them and secure them in the hut. He then ordered he did not want to see anyone arm the new prisoners of war. 1 or 2 of the men took that to mean if he didn't see it, it didn't happen. And as soon as the captain was gone, the once lone soldier who had grown to become a man within moments of stepping foot inside the camp pistol-whipped the smug grins from the faces of 6 of those German bastards. The black snow-like flakes had stopped falling. The fire in the belly of the furnace at the bowels of the chimney had been extinguished by the now stomach-strong soldiers. It would be a few more weeks until the full extent of what happened that morning started to sink in. It would be months and years before the world was even ready to understand. It would be a morning I'd never forget. A morning that started by crawling on my belly, covered in black flakes of scattered soul.